Welcome back, guys, to my channel. This is another new video. Welcome to Miko's bedroom again. Now, today's video, another. This is the fifth or sixth day in a row that I'm doing a video, so yay me! I'm keeping on a schedule. Now, you're gonna notice that my last video, if you've watched it, was on the European Parliament. The video that we're watching was on the big screen, so to speak, and my face was on in the darn left corner. And now I'm reversing how I did beforehand because part of my face was blocking said video. And so tell me, what would you prefer? A smaller video but a bigger face, or a smaller face and a bigger video? And uh, I'm gonna try to make it so that my face doesn't block the video at all. So for today is the 28th, I think. The 29th. The 29th. Um, yeah, the 29th. Today we're gonna watch another video called "The Fall of Saigon." To be honest, I come up with these videos just by typing history on YouTube. Anywho, I didn't have any idea, and this is actually a great video because it's been on the news lately. You know, the comparison between what's happening, the evacuation in Afghanistan and the evacuation in Saigon, which I know nothing about. And I want to learn more about it, and I hope you're gonna learn with me. So yeah, let's watch this video.
This video has been made possible thanks to Morning Brew. If you're like many of us, our mornings consist of mindlessly scrolling the internet and social media for 5 minutes every morning, day. The Fall of Saigon, April 30th, 1975. The end of the Vietnam War. Gone, April 30th, 1975. The end of the Vietnam War. After almost 2 decades of fighting and millions of lives lost, the Vietnam War came to an end in 1975. Hardly anyone believed that after 19 years of bitter fighting, the conflict would be...
You know what's insane? I'm sorry I'm pausing, but it is what it is. What's insane to me is how he said that millions of lives were lost during the Vietnam War, which is something I knew nothing about, of course. But I thought that when you think of a big war, of big casualties, you go First World War, Second World War, and then what? Vietnam? Korea? I don't know the numbers, but if millions died, which is it's insane that millions died after the Second World War. I don't know, it may seem ridiculous just saying it. Like, of course, people were gonna die in the war, but it's
resolved in just 2 months. In March 1975, the strength and superiority of the South Vietnamese forces gave the impression that the conflict was still far from over. Yet on the last day of April, the North Vietnamese flag was waving in Saigon. The collapse of South Vietnam had already begun in 1973, when American forces started leaving the country.
I wonder on which side Vietnam's populace was during that war. In terms of, were they more supportive of the northern slash communistic regime or the southern democratic regime? It's a good question because in those type of situations you don't know because both regimes were headed by dictators. From what I've heard, it's I don't have that much in-depth knowledge when it comes to Vietnam, but it's not about it's I wonder which regime was more supported overall in Vietnam.
This withdrawal of troops was followed by a reduction in financial and military aid. After President Nixon resigned, he was replaced by Gerald Ford.
That looks nothing like Nixon. This guy, really? You can make a better face? Listen, I know nothing about graphic design, but that's Nixon?
Who was unable to convince Congress to honor Nixon's promises to rescue Saigon from a communist takeover. With the War Powers Act introduced, there was practically no chance of the United States returning its troops to South Vietnam. In fact, the Americans had left an enormous amount of weapons and equipment with their allies.
We always do that. Well, we.
The ARVN.
I'm not American, but they always do that. Americans, they always leave everything. Like, is it more expensive to bring it home?
In 1973, the ARVN numbered almost 1 million soldiers and definitely had a numerical advantage over its enemies. The weak and corrupt government in Saigon, led by President Win Van Tu, however, made this advantage meaningless. With American financial aid ending up in the pockets of politicians, the
This is a little bit of a parallel between Vietnam and Afghanistan because I've heard that there was a lot of corruption going on in Afghanistan in terms of the high leadership. I mean, it's basically the same thing.
ARVN was denied fuel, ammunition, and supplies to support its advantage. By the end of 1974, this advantage had practically disappeared. Even more worrying, though, was the low morale of the general public, resulting in limited support for the Army's operations in the country. Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, was rebuilding its strength after losses suffered in 1972. In December 1974, they initiated an attack on Phuc Long province. The aim of the attack was to test the strength and morale of the ARVN and gauge American willingness to interfere in the conflict. With no response from the Americans, the North Vietnamese decided in March 1975 to launch a larger offensive against the ARVN troops in the Central Highlands. 5 NVA divisions supported by artillery and new tanks received from the Soviet Union attacked on March 1st. Troops of the ARVN fought bravely, but were surrounded when the NVAs entered the town of Ban My Thuot. With the key road to Saigon cut off, President Tu ordered the rest of his troops in the Central Highlands to march to the coast, and from there south to Saigon. The withdrawal under fire turned into a chaotic flight of soldiers and civilians. In the northern parts of the country, the situation wasn't any different. An all-out attack by the NVA forces pushed the ARVN forces to the coastal city of Da Nang. With a total collapse of the command chain, soldiers started evacuating by sea. More than 70,000 of them failed to escape and ended up being captured by the NVA. The spring offensive ended by the end of March and was a complete success for the NVA. Surprised by their easy victory, the North Vietnamese decided not to wait until the following year, as was the plan, but to attack the capital city of Saigon straight away. Facing a total defeat, President Tu ordered his troops to organize the defense at the town of Xuân Loc. The South Vietnamese believed they could stop the communists right there at the gateway of Saigon. Indeed, they fought bravely, causing more than 2,000 casualties among the NVA. But despite this, the ARVN troops couldn't repel the relentless onslaught of NVA troops. Once they were surrounded, the South Vietnamese withdrew southwards. On April 20th, the NVA troops entered the town. The Battle of Xuân Loc was the last major battle of the Vietnam War. There was practically nothing between the NVA forces and Saigon. The fall of the capital city.
You know what's really interesting about this video is that we don't learn anything. I mean, I'm Canadian. Granted, it's not my history, quote unquote, but we don't learn anything about the American Vietnamese War. You know, it's a shame because it's so interesting. And what's even more mesmerizing to me is that in today's day and age, the communists want it, and there's still a communistic regime nowadays that's bordering. I think they have a border with China, and they're more pro the West than China. It's such a contrast because America fought so hard to try to contain Soviet expansion. Because their idea was basically if one country falls, it's a domino effect. They will all fall. But it's a very interesting thing that Vietnam is more aligned diplomatically with the West, with whom they had a war with. If you had a very bloody war in your country against an enemy, a foreign power, I mean, you would think there would be, some animosity, even 40 years later, 50. It's a very interesting concept. That's, like how bad, how much, how afraid are they of China that they're willing to, align themselves. Actually, that's what I heard.
Was imminent. People inside the city were panic-stricken. Memories of the 1968 massacre in the town of Hue were fresh in their memories, and many feared something similar would happen there in Saigon. The Americans and South Vietnamese linked to the government believed they had the most reason to be afraid. When the spring offensive began, the first American citizens had already started to fly out of Saigon. In early April, members of the American Defense Attaché Office, the DAO, started to leave the city as well. At the same time, President Ford announced the beginning of Operation Baby Lift. The aim of the operation was to evacuate children from the country and take them to other countries for adoption. Most of the children went to the United States, but some also found families in Australia, Canada, France, and West Germany.
Dude.
The operation began with a tragedy, though. A plane carrying children and DAO staff crashed, killing everyone on board. However, the operation managed to save more than 2,500 children. More extensive.
This is brutal, man. When you hear stories like this, where, you lost the war, you lost, then you're basically scrambling to do everything you can to just get anything positive out of this.
Was the evacuation of American embassy personnel and other employees of the American government. These included not only American citizens, but also citizens of foreign countries and a great number of South Vietnamese. All of them, along with their families, were desperate to escape. When on April 21st, Sun Loc fell into the hands of the North Vietnamese, the evacuation escalated. Evacuees gathered at the DAO compound next to Tan Son Nhut Airport. From there, they were transferred to the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, and the Yokota Air Base in Japan. At that point, 20 C-141 and 20 C-130 aircraft landed each day at Tan Son Nhut. On April 27th, the NVA forces launched rocket attacks into Saigon. On the following day, 3 A-37 Dragonflies of the North Vietnamese People's Air Force bombed the Tan Son Nhut Air Base. The attacks continued into the early morning of April 29th. U.S. Ambassador Graham Martin, who was in charge of the evacuation, decided to call off all fixed-wing evacuations. He called for Operation Frequent Wind to begin, the evacuation by helicopters.
Frequent Wind.
Evacuation
What a name.
was already planned as an option. There was an established map of assembly areas, and when the evacuation signal was transmitted on the Armed Forces radio, the prepared code, "The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising," was read out, followed by the playing of the song.
That's the code? The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees? What if someone's just saying the weather? Someone asks him, hey, how hot it is? It's boiling at 105 degrees. And then what? Like there's a scramble? Oh my god. Operation Flywind. What? It was a cool name. I really forgot it. What kind of name? I don't know. It's 105 degrees. Okay.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. After the evacuation was initiated, buses picked up evacuees from assembly areas and transferred them to the DAO compound. From there, helicopters from the Naval Air Force and CIA-controlled Air America flew evacuees to one of the 11 ships of the Task Force 76, which were joined by the USS Hancock and the USS Midway aircraft carriers. The NVA anti-aircraft batteries avoided firing at American aircraft. They didn't want to provoke any response from the Americans that would jeopardize their operation. They did, however, continue to shell the airstrip and the DAO compound. It was only a matter of hours before the compound would fall into the hands of the North Vietnamese. By the evening, it became impossible for the evacuation of DAO to continue, and helicopters were rerouted to the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. 30 minutes after midnight on April 30th, the last of the Marines protecting the site left the DAO compound, but only after they had set it on fire. More than 10,000 people gathered in front of the embassy waiting to be evacuated. Unfortunately, there was no time for all of them to be saved, even though every 10 minutes one CH-46 and CH-53 were landing and taking off in the embassy. With NVA troops already entering the city, the evacuation had to be completed fast. The last of the Marine security guards took off from the embassy rooftop at 7:53 a.m. During the evacuation process, other locations were used as well as those that had been designated. One Air America Bell 205 helicopter landed on the rooftop of the Pittman apartment building at 22 Zalong Street to collect a South Vietnamese intelligence officer, along with several other evacuees. Some South Vietnamese even used their own aircraft to get out of the city as well, especially military figures and their families. Several South Vietnamese helicopters landed on ships of the Task Force 76. Each of them was thrown overboard to make room for the other helicopters that were coming in. Some South
Woohoo! What? I hope they were thrown when the people were out. I'm gonna assume they're throwing helicopters overboard, dude. Uh, yeah, I mean it sucks because the people who won't be rescued because there will always be someone, either 10 people or 1,000 or 100,000. They're fucked. You know, I mean depending on the regime that takes over, if if the regime sees you as someone who fought against you for decades, and then at some point the regime that you fought against finally has some power, they're gonna use it. They're gonna want the revenge. I mean, maybe to be honest, the best thing for the regime to do in terms of PR is to do nothing, no repercussions, to just give a blank check to everybody, like, yeah, you fought against us, but from today, clean slate, because it will help any regime. I'm talking about the Taliban and here the North Vietnamese. It will help them when it comes to PR. You know, we didn't do anything to you guys. Even though you lost the war, we didn't touch you. But I don't know how it's gonna go. I mean, look what happened in Kabul and on the airport. I mean, that was tragic. 70 people died. But that wasn't the Taliban. That was a whole other thing. I might do a video on it. Actually, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, let's finish this video. There's only 2 minutes left.
South Vietnamese pilots even deliberately crashed their aircraft into the sea after they had disembarked their evacuees. After the fall of Xuân Loc, President Thieu was forced to resign on April 21st. He was succeeded by Vice President Tran Van Huong, who also resigned 7 days later. The last president of South Vietnam was General Duong Van Minh. After suffering such a series of defeats, the ARVN was in a state of chaos. What was left of it, under the command of the 3rd Corps, organized the defense of Saigon. On April 27th, the first rockets fell on the city, marking the beginning of the fall of Saigon. The following day, the NVA troops were already on the outskirts of the city. Officers and soldiers of the ARVN defending the city were reluctant to fight and were surrendering en masse to the NVAs. On April 30th, a final push was made to seize the city. ARVN soldiers guarding the Tan Son Nhut air base put up a fierce defense against the NVAs. They withdrew from the base only after President Minh announced the unconditional surrender of his forces at 10:24 a.m.
Props to those guys, that fought to the bitter end because they had to know it's over, you know. But you fought to the end. Hey, there's honor in that, I guess.
NVA tanks stormed the presidential palace. Inside was President Minh, sitting with his counselors on chairs on the palace steps, waiting to hand over the government.
Props to the president that stayed. I don't know what happened to the 2 guys that resigned. Did they flee? But the guy stayed, man. And he didn't know what his. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he was executed, tortured. I don't know. But he stayed. Hey, it takes a little balls to stay, man. And when your country collapses, they're gonna want to come for you. You're the lightning rod, so to speak.
Later that day, he announced in a radio broadcast that the Saigon government was now dissolved. On May 7th, NVA troops held a victory parade in the streets of Saigon, which was renamed Ho Chi Minh City after the late North Vietnamese leader.
Yeah.
The fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975, marked the end of the Vietnam War after 19 and a half years. 1975, North Vietnamese leader. The fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975, marked the end of the Vietnam War after 19 and a half years.
20 years, man. America, a lot of patterns. 20 years here, 20 years there. What's this? An extra video bonus? Uh, I don't know, to be honest, why there was such an outcry, in the media about, oh, this is the same as the fall of Saigon. Was it because, the embassy had to be evacuated by helicopter? That was the embarrassment, I guess. Uh, I guess, I get it that they couldn't evacuate. That's the parallel. They couldn't evacuate the people who collaborated, or at least most of them. It sucks, but when it happens, it's not gonna be clean. For my opinion, when it comes to America getting out of Afghanistan, I'm all for it. To be honest, I don't think this should stay anymore. It's done. It's over. It was an economically, Afghanistan. It's one of those pitfalls. It's a black hole. You go there and it's over. It's the Soviets went there, Americans. Maybe now, there's a little bit of talk. I'm not positive it's gonna happen, but the Chinese, yeah. So it's nobody should go in Afghanistan. Leave it alone. Leave them. Good for them. They're basically the dawn of the modern age. There are deserts and caves, and they're basically fighting guerrilla style till they win or whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned as much as I did, which I didn't know anything about this. Truthfully, we learned when the war ended, 75, 19 years after it started, 1956. 56 to 57. I don't know the exact date, but I'm trying to just do the math. Uh, it was a very interesting video, to be honest. Truly. As I said, thanks for coming to watch me, react to this video, and I will see you guys next time. See ya.